So welcome to the famous kickoff. Hey, hey. So that's the first meetup probably in the long series. And I'm Alex. I need to say thanks to Jeannie Feldkamp. She's from Famous Marketing. She sent me the t-shirts and the stuff and stickers. Of course, thanks to Google for hosting us. And now let's start. So before we start, I will give a few words about myself. So I'm a web guy. I'm doing web for 8-9 years, something like that. I worked in these companies, so if you work there too, please come and say hi. If not, come and say hi anyway. I'm doing some private projects. One of the projects I'm doing with Famous, so that's how I started playing with the stuff. Alex. So I will give a little introduction what Famous is about, and after that Avi will dive a little deeper into how you start a project with Famous, and then Jill will tell us about integration with Angular. So what is Famous? If you look at their website, that's what they write. So it's a free open source JavaScript framework that will help you create smooth, complex UIs for any screen. So the keywords are marked in red. And we will see why. But first of all, I will show you some demo. It's an app which was developed with Famous. Just pay attention to the smooth animation and all the transitions and stuff that you see. So it's some photographers' conference in France or something like that. So they made an app with Famous. And as you can see, it works really, really smooth. And I will show you another example. You probably saw it. It's not working so well. But we have a periodic table here. You probably saw it because it was part of marketing video Famous before they launch. So you can play with it here, and it's not WebGL, and it's not Flash and other evil stuff. It's just CSS. You can rotate and go in and whatever. So all the links are in the slide, so you will find them. And a little about history, how Famous started. It started as a private project in 2011, and they had some seed funding of 1 million. After that, they had another funding of 4 million, and their official released on 9th of April. It means they are half-year old, officially. And 2 months before, they had huge funding with 25 million. If you think of open source organization that getting this amount of money, it's really huge. And the founder is Steve Newcomb. So they have the version 0.1. They had it on 9th of April. And currently, we are on version 0.3. There is still no wrapper. I mean, if you write your application, you write it on JavaScript. But if you want to wrap it specifically for some platform, for iPhone, Android, whatever, you have to use some wrapper. You can use currently Cordova, Trigger.io, or any other. There are few. There were some rumors in August that they're gonna release the wrapper in the 0.3 version, but it didn't happen. There are also another rumors that it's gonna cost you money to wrap your application, but it's just rumors. Meanwhile, so there is a lot of JavaScript frameworks. Part of them are only for mobile, and part of them only for desktop, and some of them doing both. So why we actually need another one? So the catch is that the catch is performance, because a web app must have at least 40 frames per second, so it will feel like a native app. And Famous promising something like 60 frames per second. And we will see now how they do it. So how does it work? So it's 2014 already, and we can do really great stuff with CSS. And just to show you some examples. This is written entirely in CSS. The Wi-Fi is really slow, but it's just jQuery, I think, CSS transitions, and nothing more. And you have this site, which gives you some creatures written with CSS, and you can create your own, and so on. There is another one which shows you the cat, and this cat can become really fat. Yeah, the internet is sluggish, yeah. But at some point it becomes fat, and yeah. So it's really cool. And even more, you can have your 3D solar system writing with CSS. All this stuff are in CodePen, so you can see all the code. You can also play with it here a little. And you can see it's written entirely with just CSS transition and some other stuff. No Famous. Okay, so internet is slow. So how does it work? Before we had Famous, and we need to do some animation in our browser. You probably need to trigger some CSS-based animation in your browser, and then browser knows how to apply hardware acceleration and recompute the layout of your page from the DOM change. It means then if you have a lot of nesting in your DOM and you want to animate some button which has like 15 items in a hierarchy, so it will behave really slowly. What happens in Famous, it uses two things. It's matrix 3D transform and request animation frame function. So the things marked in red, we will explain them now. And Famous describe the complete layout and animation of your app, and it's accelerated with consistent performance. So what is matrix 3D? It's a CSS function. It's described a 3D transform as a homogeneous matrix. It's just matrix of 4-on-4 numbers, and you can describe your CSS transitions with this matrix. And you have functions in CSS that get parameters of the matrix and create the animation for you. So what you can do with this matrix, you can do 4 things. You can do rotation. You can take an object, div, input, whatever, and rotate it. Or you can do scaling. You can stretch your object, or vice versa. You can do skew, which is moving the axis. And you can do translation, which means just move the object as is to some direction. And each of these things you can do on all the axes. So this way you can do almost any animation that you can imagine in 3D. That's an example of the worst slide that you can put in your presentation. Like, don't do it. It's just the best description that I got from the internet. Just let's read it together. The request animation frame function tells the browser that you wish to perform an animation and requests that the browser call a specified function to update an animation before the next repaint. So you have some function which basically says, I want to move some element from that point to that point and do some animation. And the browser knows how to deal with it. And the number of the callbacks, which is called, is usually 60 times per second, but it will generally match your display refresh rate. So that's the number 60 that you saw before. And a long time ago, if you want to do animation or something, you would probably use timeout or some other JavaScript techniques. But request animation frame is the browser function, and it's available after IE, ESR, and all the normal browsers. So IESR, I10. Yeah, so what it does, it's optimize concurrent animation. If you have 2 or 3 things animating on the same page, it will optimize it and make it run better. The tabs which are not visible will stop the animation, which is not the case if you do it with timeout or something else. And because of that, partially, it's less CPU, GPU, memory, and if it's mobile, it at least saves battery life. So that's the point in general. What happens is the part of the reasons why Famous are doing so smooth animation is that they don't use DOM, because in DOM you can have a real big nesting and you want to animate some button. So your browser will have to get to the button and do the animation, and going over all the nesting in the DOM is taking time. So Famous is using something called surface and modifiers. When surface replace everything you know in the DOM. Can be input, div, whatever element you can think of. And modifier describe the behavior, how they behave, animate, whatever. And Avi will explain much better, I guess. So I will not dig into it. And Femius also has a physics engine, because if you have animation and you have some things moving on your screen, you will probably want to define some restriction and constraints and stuff. So in Femius you can define bodies, which can be anything. They have a list of defined one. They can define walls and balls and rectangular prismas and all other kind of stuff. They have constraints. That's the way the object can be connected. You can connect the ball to something else, and if you move something else, it will move together. And it have forces, which they say they define it as soft constraints, but it's just forces as you can think of it. It can be a gravity force. It can be, I don't know, if you have a spring, it's the force of the spring, and so on. So I have also a small example of the physics. No. Yeah, it's really slow. So you have some balls here, and you have gravity, and you can move this box and play with it. So that's just a small example. There are a lot of integration starting with another frameworks. There is an integration with Angular, integration with React, integration with Meteor, and some others. If you just dig into the GitHub, you will find many of them. And this is just a bunch of links you should definitely check out. They are working really hard on the documentation, so there are still stuff to improve, but it's pretty readable. For the guys who need the book, there is a book that's gonna come out soon, and it's just a useful links to look at.